Can you even see me? This house is so dark. That's crooked. Hi everyone, welcome back to another video on Read Between the Grinds. I am so excited to talk about one of my favorite topics this evening, horror books and movies or screen productions, let's say. So what I'm gonna do is I just picked some recent books, some not so recent books that I have read, and then some horror movies / screen adaptations that I have seen, to kind of just compare how the book holds up to the movie, how the movie holds up to the book. Let me put a quick disclaimer in here. I am not a film bro, okay? I am not going to be speaking very eloquently about film, about movies. I know what movies I like. I know when I feel like something is well done, but you're not going to be seeing any like video essays from me, about the direction of a movie, okay? So we're going to jump right in because I have a lot that I could talk about. I narrowed it down to 5. But I am so curious always to know what everybody else thinks about the ones I talk about, but then also, what movies do you think did a good job adapting from a book? So I'm going to start out with maybe one of the most famous horror book adaptations, and that is The Shining by Stephen King. If you watched my Stephen King video, you already kind of know my thoughts about The Shining. I think this is a fantastic book. I'm not really going to talk too much about like the Stephen King of it all. I'm going to talk more about the differences between the movie or similarities. So I love both adaptations. This is a controversial subject for some reason. People have very strong feelings about the movie versus the book and Kubrick's interpretation of the book and, the choices that were made in the movie. I love both. I think they both hold up very well. What I love about the book though, and this is why I will recommend it for anybody who has seen the movie but not read the book, which is likely because it's one of the most famous horror movies of all time, I would say. Oh my God, my books. And that is that the book goes into a lot more detail of the history of the hotel. And I love that. I love the backstory. It's one of the reasons why I love it so much, the book, because it goes into so much history that the adaptations just never have time to tackle. And even though this is definitely not a humongous book, this really goes into the history of it and some of the more like creepy things that have happened at the hotel over the years, and then how it all ties together with the current family who's living there. So obviously though, the movie is also, a classic. It is so well done. It's one of my favorites. When I put on that movie and I hear that music, something happens within, I'm just so drawn in by that movie, the acting, the scenery, like the shots, like, everybody can like pretty much immediately when you say The Shining, you can think of a scene from that movie. I obviously always think of the elevator doors opening in the blood, or the twins or something like that. What's his name? Danny, tricycling down the hallway and seeing the twins. So the movie is for a reason a classic, and I absolutely love it, but I love the book too. And I think that if you have seen the movie and not yet read the book, you're doing yourself a disservice, because I think this book also tackles Jack's descent into madness in a way that the movie doesn't, and in a way that sometimes I think movies can't. I think film does a really great job of getting inside characters' heads, but nothing does that like a book, obviously, right? Because you're kind of like there in their head with them. And I think something is lost a little bit in the movie by not having, like, Jack becomes obsessed with the history of the hotel, and the weird things that happen. And that, I think, really says a lot about his mental state and where we end up at the end of the story. So 5 out of 5 stars for both the movie and the book adaptation. Nope, the book is the original. The book and the movie adaptation of The Shining. The next book I want to talk about, book and movie that I want to talk about, is The Exorcist. So I actually just very recently read this, and if you watched our fall TBR video, then you will know that it was on my fall TBR. Spoiler alert, I did read it. As I mentioned in that video, I actually somehow didn't know that it was, and I don't own it, that's why I'm not holding it and waving it around annoyingly. I didn't know that it was a book. I don't know how I missed that. But I have seen the movie. I've only seen the movie once. So here's what I'm going to say. Possession themes, general religious themes like the Catholic Church, the priest coming in to do an exorcism. Dare I say it, I'm a little bored by those kind of movies and themes and books. It's just not my favorite. I far prefer like a haunted house or folk horror or things like that. I'm just not drawn in by it. It doesn't really scare me. So it doesn't work on me very well. I think that The Exorcist, the original movie, is obviously a classic for a reason, much like The Shining. It is really, especially for the time period that it came out, it's really captivating, really shocking. And the acting in it is obviously, the little girl that plays Reagan, God bless her, is she okay? But so I had seen the movie first because I didn't know that it was a book. And then I read the book just, like a couple of months ago. And what I will say is the book is very, very, very similar to the movie. In fact, and I might be wrong, I should probably fact check myself, but I didn't do that before I started filming. So don't hold me to this. I believe that the author was involved in the production of the movie and the writing of the script. And you can kind of tell because it's like there are scenes that even though it's been years since I've seen the movie, when I was reading the book, I was like, oh, this happens in the movie. Like word for word happens in the movie. Which is not a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. So I liked it. But I think the reason why I wasn't completely obsessed with it and the reason why I'm not obsessed with the movie is because it's just not a genre of horror that I am particularly drawn toward. However, because it's a classic, I wanted to, tick it off my list. One thing I will say about The Exorcist, both the book and the movie, it's very shocking, especially for the time period that it came out. When Reagan is possessed by this demon, the things that she says, the things that the demon has her say, are obviously things a child shouldn't be, is typically not saying, thinking, doing. And so that is very shocking. And I like a shock factor in a horror book. I think that that's there for a reason, obviously. But if you are sensitive to that kind of thing, I was actually kind of like, oh my gosh, this book came out when? And this is what's in it? I read a lot of shocking horror, but to me, in my mind, that only has come out, in more recent years. And that's not true. There was a lot of crazy stuff happening in the 70s. So anyway, though, I like them both. To me, they're not 5 stars. But again, I think that's more just because of my personal preference. If you like possession and especially like if you like, like demons and the Catholic Church and, the God versus evil type fight, then you would probably like this book and movie. Again, if you're a horror fan, you've probably already seen The Exorcist, but you may not have read the book because you might be like me and not know that it existed. So, all right, don't worry, we're back to waving around. We're going to talk about The Woman in Black. This was also my fall TBR. And I had never seen the movie either. So I just read the book and watched the movie just like a handful of months ago. Here's what I'm going to say about this. I loved the book. I can't remember if I gave it 4 or 5 stars, but I thought it was great. It's absolutely a gothic horror, which is so fun. I love gothic horror, and it's a haunted house. It's a crumbling old house, and it gets me every single time. What I loved about this book was the atmosphere is impeccable. If you haven't read this book or seen the movie, the house is set in an area where the pathway to it floods like a couple times a day, or maybe once a day. And so if you're there and the tide comes in, basically, it's not exactly what it is, you're stuck until that water recedes and you can get back out. And so our main character is there, like settling the estate of the woman who just died in this house, the old woman, and creepy things start happening. Love. So I loved the book. I will say it is extremely slow, as gothic horror tends to be. In fact, I was actually really surprised because by the time like things truly started happening, like the plot really amped up, I had so few pages left that I thought something was wrong with my copy. I was like, there's no way it can wrap up. And it does. So it's a very abrupt wrap up, and it is shocking as in more happens by the end of this than I was expecting. And it's pretty rough, actually. So I finished the book. It's not a long book at all, which I really do appreciate a novella for horror. I think short form works the best for horror. The second you drag it out too long, unless you're like Stephen King or, some of the other greats, sometimes it can just be dragged out way too long. So then I watched the movie. What can we say? It was fine. However, I don't remember most of it because I was super spacing out. I just didn't love it. It was fine. And I think that's the general consensus. It was not very critically acclaimed. It wasn't like, oh my God, this is the next great masterpiece of horror. Daniel Radcliffe does a great job in it. And I love Daniel Radcliffe. I always love when he's doing something different, and he's just a weird little guy. Love him. So I think he did a great job. But the movie itself is just a little bit like run-of-the-mill horror movie. And so it didn't wow me, but I can never say no to a crumbling old mansion that's haunted by the ghosts of its former inhabitants, and I do love the premise of the ghost in this story. I don't want to really say too much, but the woman in black, she is the ghost, okay? Spoiler alert. I like the reason why she is the way that she is. I thought that was very interesting, and I thought the revenge that she, and like the vengeance that she is trying to take on the current inhabitants of like the village or this house or whatever, whoever like encounters her, it's pretty upsetting. So yeah, I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked the book a lot more. I thought the movie was kind of a skip. All right, we're gonna mix things up now and talk about something that I don't like. Okay, so this is The Ritual by Adam Neville. This is another situation where I didn't know that it was a book before I watched the movie. A lot of horror movies, I come to seeing them through my husband, who is a huge horror fan, and was a horror fan long before I was. So he has a lot more history into the movie and the screen adaptation side of horror. And so often he'll recommend a movie to me, and I don't even know that it's based on a book until after the movie's over. So the movie, it came out on Netflix. It is amazing. Okay, it's one of my all-time favorite horror movies. I put it in the top 5 every single time. Sometimes, if pressed, I say it's my favorite just because it's hard to pick a favorite. I think it is so well done. I think it's amazing. The acting, the end, the creepiness, the horror, the unsettling nature of what's happening, the unease. How many more adjectives can I use? So anyway, I love this movie. I've seen it many times. And when I found this book, while I was book shopping, I was like, well, I'm going to buy it because I'm going to love it, right? I did something that I have never done before. And I DNF'd this book at 85%. I don't DNF very often. I have nothing against DNFing. I think you should. If you're not clicking with a book, life is too short to read books that you don't like. But I was 85% of the way through it. And the reason I know I was so far, or I know the exact percentage, is because I was listening to the audiobook by the end, just trying to get through it faster. I didn't finish this. I quit listening because I have a real issue with the way that the author writes women. The way that Adam Neville wrote women in this book did not come across as the characters having flaws or the characters behaving in a type of way to like explain something about their character, right? It was like the actual description of the women. So like, if your character, it was like the exposition, like she walked into the room, she was wearing a blue dress. But instead of saying it that way, the choices that he made to describe the women in this book, and toward the end, there's a couple female characters that he describes so awfully that's what made me stop reading. And what's important here is that he doesn't do that with the male characters. So I think that's like, if you're going to be that way, okay, same treatment for the men then, right? So eventually I DNF'd it. The other reason why I felt like even more like I wasn't committed to finishing it was because I don't love the way the book ends. Whereas I think that the movie did such a great job of wrapping things up, and the plot device that they used, in particular the people at the end, love it. It really leans into folk horror. This is folk horror, but the ending just felt contrived. It felt stupid, in my opinion. Sorry, Adam, if you're watching this. I'm really ragging on your book. But I didn't like it. I gave it 1 star and said that I DNF'd it. So unfortunately, I own this book now if anyone wants to buy it. All right, and I did indeed save the best for last. So Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House. I talked about this in my Summerween video, so you already know how much I love this book. You know how much I love my copy. It's an old copy and it... ASMR. Makes good sounds. You know, I love this book. I love everything about it. Okay, all right, let me collect my thoughts. So the book is extremely, and the movie adaptation or the screen adaptation that I'm going to be comparing it to for this purpose is The Haunting of Hill House, Mike Flanagan's adaptation on Netflix, which is a miniseries. It is extremely different. Like, not even the same story. I mean, the similarities are that there's a house called Hill House that's probably haunted, and some of the characters have the same names. And that's about it. There are some nods to the original story, but in the book version, if you don't know anything about the book, a group of individuals are coming to Hill House with they call him a doctor. He's an occult scholar looking for solid evidence of the psychic phenomenon called haunting. So he's like basically trying to prove that Hill House is haunted. And this group of people comes and attempts to figure out what's going on. And some crazy things start happening. What's so good about this book, because that could be any book, right? But what's so good about this book is Shirley Jackson's writing. It's just stunning. There is I'm not even gonna read it because it's a really long sentence, but like the very first sentence of the first chapter is just such a stunning sentence. You know, when you read a sentence, you're like, wow, how could someone put words together in that way? This is a very slow burn of a book. Not a ton happens, and then all of a sudden a lot starts happening, and that's Gothic horror in a nutshell. But it's amazing. Highly recommend the book. Okay, if you have not seen the Netflix adaptation, Mike Flanagan's The Haunting of Hill House, first of all, what are you even doing here? Stop this video and go watch that. My husband and I just finished a rewatch of it for spooky season. And when I tell you that it genuinely might be one of my favorite pieces of media to exist, I am not over exaggerating. It is so well done. The acting is amazing. The cinematography is amazing. The story, by the time that you reach even about halfway through the season, but then, you know, those last few episodes and you start understanding some of the pieces that that have kind of been like dripping at you the whole season or the whole show, and then it kind of like all comes together. It's just so masterfully done. It's genuinely so scary. Well, it is and it isn't. I think if you're scared by like creeping horror, there are definitely jump scares, and there's a jump scare that gets everybody. Like, it is so unexpected, it gets everybody. But there are so many of those, you know, like wide shots where the person is right here, but you can see the entire dark hallway back here, and something is maybe moving, but it's really hard to tell, and something just seems off. There's so much of that, and there's so many Easter eggs. People have spent, you know, entire videos and TikTok accounts breaking down every ghost that you see in the background, every Easter egg. It's just so well done. Be prepared to cry though. It is absolutely the saddest thing I've ever seen. The last episode, like the very ending of the series, I've seen this before. We were watching it and I was crying so hard. I was like sobbing. I couldn't breathe. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I almost made us turn it off. But I love it so much. It's just stunning. And I love the book. It's a 5-star read. It's one of my favorite books, but the show is just so good. And again, it's not even similar at all. It's about a family. And these people are not family members. So, anyway, recommend both for very different reasons. Go into The Haunting of Hill House, the show, if you want to experience heartbreak. Okay. So I guess that's all I have to say about that. I could talk about that for a whole video. All right. Thank you everyone for joining me today to talk about, or to listen to me talk about horror books and horror movies. I love horror as a genre, and as you can see, I have a real affinity for like haunted houses for sure. Um, Folk horror, the supernatural. I don't love horror that's like slashers and like mean things. Like I'm not gonna be there in the movie theater seeing the next Terrifier. But if you have more recommendations of books like this or movies or shows like the ones I've talked about that I enjoyed, I'd love to hear them. Thanks again for joining us, and stay tuned for the next video on Read Between the Grinds. Who knows what we'll be doing? Probably drinking coffee and reading books though.